everybody, a warm welcome to another interview on Wisdom from North. I'm Jannecke, and today I'm very excited to be here with Ishtar, also called Thomas Howell. Ishtar is a meditation teacher, he's an intuitive astrologer, he's a writer, he's a gardener, and an Ishaya monk. And he has a story to tell, because when he was 13 years old, he experienced a horrific car accident where he had an NDE, a near-death experience. And being already a sensitive child, this experience really opened him up to deeper levels of consciousness. So we'll get into that, and also his meditation practice, how we can find that bliss inside of us. Also, I want to mention that we just opened Wisdom from North membership, and this is a place for you who wants to thrive and blossom and open up to more of who you are, expand your consciousness and walk the path together. And in the membership, you will receive masterclasses with new teachers, the most authentic, wonderful teachers that I have come across through 400 interviews. And Ishtar will also provide a beautiful meditation for the members. So if something sparked within you now, please, you're welcome to check it out, wisdomfromnorth.com/membership. That being said, let's dive into this interview. Hello, Ishtar. How are you doing?
Hello, Jannecke. I'm doing very well.
Beautiful. So, do you call yourself, should I call you Ishtar or should I call you Thomas? Yeah?
Oh, go. Most people call me Ishtar. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, let me start there. What is an Ishaya monk?
Oh, it's kind of a very new, well, it's depending on who you talk to, it's a very new or a very old sort of thing. But Ishaya is a Sanskrit word which simply means that which supports, you might say, I don't know, cosmic consciousness, or even if you go more into the Christian tradition or Christian New Age tradition, Christ consciousness.
Right.
And so Ishaya monks are trace their lineage back to Isha, back to the Himalayas. They have a notion that Jesus in fact had traveled at some point to the Himalayas and learned these sorts of techniques. I never pushed this part of the tradition very hard because I've also been somewhat trained as a historian, so I only usually like to deal in things that I can prove or have direct experience of, but nevertheless that was the tradition that was given to me, and so in my life as an Ishaya monk, what it's meant was almost like any other contemplative who's very dedicated. There was a sense of committing one's life to a meditation practice or practices which move the mind from, being very, very busy on the surface to always going inward to the source, always connecting with the source of consciousness and thought. So.
Right. Yeah, we're going to go deeper into that later on, because I'd love how you're saying that you found an effortless way of meditating, and I think that's very important. Now, everybody knows, or not everybody, but a lot of us know how important it is to meditate, but a lot of people have difficulties doing that. But there's a backstory here, and I just saw a long interview with Buddha at the gas pump. Yeah, I love that show. So you also told that you have these two sides, like you've been doing so much in your life. You have so much inside of you. You could ended up being an artist or an historian or this or that, and then you kind of felt compelled to walk this spiritual path. And I'm interested in that because it seemed like it almost was a destiny sort of sense to it. But from you were a child, it seemed like you perceived life in a different way than other kids. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, and of course I had no idea for probably until I went to elementary school that anything was particularly different. Even I have a lot of early memories that I'm probably not supposed to have. I didn't find that out until I was 18. I was in an AP psychology class in high school. But I have distinct memories of sitting in the crib before I could walk, before I could talk even. And I would sit in the mornings and have a sense of being totally connected with some sort of underlying presence that seemed to not just be inside my own body, but seemed to be the same presence that was in my parents, in my sister, in the curtains that I would look at across the room, in the sunlight, in all the space. There was a real sense of almost like floating floating around on a kind of shared ocean. And this ocean, or this sense of presence everywhere, it also had a certain, kind of a liveliness, or it seemed to be light-filled. It seemed to be, there seemed to be a sense that joy wasn't just some sort of feeling that's produced by physiology, but was more like some kind of current or frequency that we sort of tap into, that was just kind of there in all the space. And so that, that was the sort of the baseline of those early experiences. And then, as you saw in that long interview, there are all sorts of extra, bells and whistles on top of that. And
right, yeah, I understood that. So was it a sense that you were separate from this frequency, this energy, or did you feel just at one with everything? Because I'm very curious, since you have a memory, like a lot of us don't remember anything from a childhood, like before 3 years old or something like that. And I have like this intuition or this belief that children, when they're born, they just feel at one with everything, that they don't really know that, that's me in the mirror and that's my mom and that's not me, in a sense.
I felt pretty one with everything, and even up until learning the pronouns and learning language. So a lot of people will think it must be language when you learn I and thou and you and you learn about all the separate objects, that must be the mechanism of forgetting. But in my case, it most certainly wasn't. I remember distinctly going around, being in the living room with my mother and saying, "This is me. I am this. I am that." And it's just kind of, she was just smiling and laughing, and I was, talking about the chaise lounge or the chair over here or the bookshelf over here, just walking around the living room. And anytime I pointed at something, there was a real sort of deeply felt sense that, this is just part of my body. I could differentiate between my body and other people's bodies. I could differentiate between this body and the chair. But there was a deep sense, a more fundamental sense that all of these objects were somehow arising out of a shared underlying body. That was at that point still my primary point of context and identification.
How long did this last? Like, when did it start to dissipate?
I kind of seemed to have been a party in its dissipation. This was at about between maybe 6.5 and 7.5, and really right as I entered first grade, that was the period that really brought things to a close. But I remember when I was 6 or so, my mother was very interested in sort of the psychoanalytic tradition and psychology in general and personality, and actually that was one word that got me that kind of got me interested. Is that, well, one of the great mysteries that I faced was, how come my father and mother, why would they go from one sort of phase to another? I would watch their reactions, and I didn't actually know what the mechanism was that caused them to sort of go into stress or feel really upset or behave in ways that seemed to look different than maybe how I felt with life. Even though I would cry and when I skinned my knee and all that sort of stuff, they seemed to really believe it. So I was fascinated, and one day I was on a walk with my mother, and I asked her about this word personality, because she kept telling me, like, you have a real unique personality. I was like, what is that? I don't think I have one of those. I don't even know I don't know what you're talking about here. And I was really curious, and suddenly when she described it, a light bulb just went off in my brain, and it was like, oh, you mean there's some sort of and this isn't exactly personality per se, a better word, maybe ego principle might be better for what I kind of understood, but there's some sort of mechanism, like a character, like a series of definitional toggles that if when one experience goes in, another reaction goes out. So at that point I was really fascinated, and I felt, this is what I need to sort of get along with everybody. This is what I need to kind of interact with everybody. And I said, I've got to have me one of those,
and then you kind of suppressed perhaps a part of you.
Well, actually, for a while, it was just actually fun and games, because each morning when she'd help me get dressed and we'd try to pick up my clothes, and some of them like turtlenecks I couldn't get into on my own, she had to still do those. I would say, well, today I like this thing, I don't like these things. This is my backstory, you know. I would make up experiences that have like conditioned me. I was trying on different conditionings, and each day they wouldn't stick, but I would wear them for that day, and then the next day another one, and then at some point at about 7 or 7.5, there just seemed to be stuff started to stick, and so. You know, that was kind of a very gradual process.
It's really fascinating because I'm thinking, is that the way we actually are? You know, that we get this veil, but it seemed like you didn't have that veil. And then I want to ask you, did you really feel just in bliss and happy all the time? Was it a really good place to be in?
I rather did. Even when I didn't feel good, there was a sense that it's just like being the ocean. Like we sort of get acclimated to only living really close to the surface. We identify as the individual waves. That's our conditioning. But at that time, when I was young, there was the wave, and I was also conscious that there were all these other strata that were underlying the wave. And my life context pretty much embraced all of these things. And so even when I remember even when I would, you know, skin my knee, you know, trip and start crying because it was bleeding, and the emotion was very strong and intense, there still was this sense of this kind of vast reservoir of peace and silence that was down there, or this vast thing. And so yeah, we kind of get cut off from that. And I think, you know, as children also, some of us might have more access to that, some of us might have a little less. It probably depends. I think it depends on a variety of factors, but we all have the access. No matter how old or young we are, we all have the access to all those deep strata.
I just wished I remembered it, but it's back in my mind somewhere. I think we never forget anything. I think all the memories are always there. We just can't access everything at the same time. And then when you were 13, something horrific happened, and it seemed like you also had some. What is it called again? Precognitive.
Precognition. Yes.
Precognitions about it. So, do you want to share?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't want to go on too much, so redirect me whenever you need to.
Well, I found it interesting that you felt that you had something to say to your mother and father.
Oh yes. Oh sure. Okay. Well, you're right. It does start with the precognition. I had those fairly frequently as a child, but most of the time they were around sort of innocuous sorts of seemingly unimportant events that would happen. You know, shortly thereafter, I would daydream people that I hadn't met yet and whole conversations, and then I would meet them and have the conversation, or I knew which raffles I should enter, or I would know how many jelly beans were in a jar. The number would just come, and I'd go win a prize at the bank or something. And
wow.
So there was kind of, with all those experiences, there was a real sense of a shared kind of frequency or shared sort of space that would be there. And this happened. It's just so happened again. It was an evening. I'd actually just broken my arm that day, getting hit by a pitch here playing baseball. So that was my big complaint was, I broke my arm. And so there I was talking with my mother, and I was kind of winding down to get ready to go to bed. And all of a sudden, that same sort of space really was there, and there was no distance between feeling that space and having some words come out of my mouth, and those words were, "Mom, are you going to die soon?" You know, it really came through, just like my body was an instrument, like some trumpet player was just blowing it through my body, and it actually startled both of us. You know, I just kind of witnessed this coming out of my mouth, and I noticed that, you know, when she received it, it kind of like it struck her, so there must have been some juice to it. And then she just, you know, very rationally, you know, she didn't have any health problems. I'd never had this fear about my mother. I was always more worried about my father. And she said, no, you know, like, I'm not going to die for quite some time. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here for you for a while, so you can grow up, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so that kind of, okay, put me at ease. I could go to bed. And only it really didn't. The next morning, almost like the last day of school for that year, I got up with a start. I mean, like the cartoon characters do in the movies, where you're in bed and suddenly you're just like that. And it was just as my mother and father were passing my bedroom door. It was actually a very beautiful scene. We had this sort of there's this kind of raised dormer or clerestory window that was in the like gave light to the second story of the house. And as they were walking by my door, the rays from the sun were coming into that window. It was almost like they were bathed in this kind of light, and only I was panting and breathing heavy as if I'd just been running from someplace, and it just ran into my body. I said, there's something that I have to tell you. And so, I was getting their attention, and I just couldn't remember what it was, and I was so frustrated that I couldn't remember it. They had to calm me down for about 5 minutes. I was absolutely agitated, like I'd been running and I had a scroll in my back pocket and it fell out. And so, okay, that was that. They calmed me down. I, got my stuff together and went off to school. And it was later that day I came home, and we had just sort of dropped my sister off at her place of work, and we were actually heading to the hospital to put a cast on my arm. And we sort of drove out. We were crossing a divided highway, 2 lanes on one side, 2 lanes on the other, and there was apparently a car that was just at the right moment or the wrong moment started to go way too fast. That was hidden behind 2 cars that were really going the speed limit, and so we pulled out, easily cleared those, but then we were hit by another car. And it was just in the moment that I was, about to talk to my mother, turn to my left, that right there was, it must have only been 6, just outside our car, and it was a small car, so it's right there, that I saw a big, like Lincoln town car type vehicle barreling towards us. And in that moment, I only had time for a couple thoughts. And the first one was very obviously shit. And the second one was, there was followed by a real deep sense, a real acceptance that, the jig is up, this life is over. And it came as a surprise, but instead of becoming tensed, I became totally relaxed. And I sort of mused to myself as I was kind of sinking into this deep, relaxed state, that I really thought this one was going to go more than 13 years. I was like, really? Okay. All right. And so right after that, there was so many of the features of the near-death experience kind of happened. I never counted it as an NDE for years, because I didn't die. In fact, I was barely injured in it. But there, the dance was up, the jig was up, the life review happened, which, to explain, was I'd always wondered as a child if one's life could really flash before your eyes. It seemed a really fantastical idea to me that much material could be compressed into such a small space. And there it was happening. And just like a seamless, they're not individual frames, but almost like a seamless loop, my entire life was rewound. And only in this case, it wasn't just the individual. I didn't have the sense of being an individual, little me looking at it. There was a sense of I was being bathed in this vast, omniscient, or almost hyper-objective flavor of consciousness that was almost reviewing everything. It had been a flavor that I'd been familiar with, even after sort of falling asleep at 7. I would kind of argue it when it would come in sometimes and say, like, you should really you should really go in another direction. I would say, shut up, But here it was, or me, however you want to call it. And, anytime there was fear, anytime there was tension, any place where I held a grudge against somebody, or I was holding on to some judgment, like a tension in my nervous system, all of those places were seen exactly for what they were, and they were forgiven and released. It was like I had all these subtle little knots in my body, in my nervous system. They were all sort of felt, massaged out. And as this process happened, going back through what was really rather a short life, as this process happened, there was, in my case, there was a sense of almost having a transparent skin removed from me. That's what it felt like. Like I had this coating on me that was massless and yet weighed everything. Like a ton of bricks. And as it came off of me, there was just this sense of increasing light, increasing silence, increasing joy, increased bliss and love. There was a sense that my little individual self was becoming ever more immersed and merged into this vast presence, even vaster than I'd ever experienced as a child. And by the end of it, must have been less than a second, who knows. By the end of it, there was just the same sense that I had as a very young child, of having no difference between me and my mother over there, or the dashboard of the car, or even the driver of the other car. They were close enough I could see them. The sky in the background, the clouds, everything was filled with this sense of just absolute exquisite beauty.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that experience. It's difficult for us who haven't experienced this to just picture a life review. Are you talking about like every single moment in your life?
Yes. Yeah.
My mind cannot understand that.
I know. I didn't think it was possible, before that to have that experience. I couldn't process that. I was like, what? That seems so, I would think that seems very improbable.
Yes.
But it was crazy. It was like some sort of seamless loop. It happened once after, years down the road in my life, almost like maybe as a refresh. But in this case, it had the greater depth. There was a sense of not only was it playing like a reel, but the context from which my life was experienced was profoundly different. For an example, I even in the process, I remember clearly each scene as if was much more vivid than I had experienced the first time. Or said another way, it was like throughout much of my life, I was only able to process such a little bit of any given moment that I was in, mainly because of all the resistance to life that I was habitually, putting up that I didn't even know about. And when we went through...
So the moment was even richer, like every moment is actually so much richer than we perhaps think.
Yeah, exactly. Especially there were a lot of the stressful memories. And only in stressful memories, I would often remember only that sort of top-end agitation. But through the life review, I was put in touch with a whole strata of notes and flavors and subtle parts of experience. And often I remembered that in that life review. I was like, oh yeah, I did get a sense of that flavor. I was just rather distracted by this level up here.
And you experienced it, and you saw it, and you had a notion that it wasn't just you seeing it. Like, my question is, you experienced it and saw it at the same time in a way, and sensed it. You were like several senses at the same time several perspectives.
Absolutely, it was a very multifaceted, or you might say multidimensional experience. Right. It was as if I could experience the first floor of the experience and the penthouse and everything in between, and so it was that's like, I think, a good analogy for it.
Wow, amazing. And it seems like many experience this. That's what is so fascinating, that this is such a common thing to experience. Yes. And some are not. And, we don't have an answer to this, but it's mysterious why some experience it and others don't. And you weren't, like you said, you weren't even dead, right?
No,
Right. So it was just this... did you feel it was an out-of-body experience in a sense? Because a lot of people hover over their body and they see the whole scenery and they see that's the car down there, that's the street down there. There are some couple of people walking around there, and
a little bit of that happened when I was in the ambulance after I was concussed. I remember the jolt, the jolt, and I remember hitting my head on the window to my right, but I didn't have any bruising, nor was the window broken. For me, it felt more like a whole body experience, and this isn't always the case. There was a sense that the whole world was my body. Kind of like when I was a young boy, there was a sense that I didn't have to go to some tunnel of light to go to some other kingdom of heaven type place. Rather, the sense was that the veils that were obscuring the here and now were brought down to reveal that this has been the kingdom of heaven the whole time.
Right.
And that was
so powerful, because I feel like this is kind of aligned with where a lot of thought leaders and spiritual teachers are saying that we're going, that instead of like a few years ago or many years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was all about like the ascension, like going up there somewhere, and now it's more like heaven is here, being here, we can access it here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the case, and there was the real sense that that the world the whole time had been, even when I didn't know it, was all the time saturated with love. Wow. That every painful bit of experience, and when this was almost like an act of love in a certain sense, or in the deepest possible sense, that the whole thing was just some grand divine play. Oh. And there I was living in my own grand divine play, and there was no sense of resistance, which probably helped me survive the accident without injury. So I do remember getting really jostled about in the impact, except I was so loose and so relaxed that it felt as if there were invisible cushions, all around me. Wow. Maybe that's the best way I could put it.
It's just so powerful, because so many people are experiencing pain and not understanding why, and it's just unbearable, and we don't really see the reason, and we think, oh, there's got to be a reason, but there's like our ego or our mind often says, but I can't find the reason. It happens again and again, and we attract the same thing, and we almost feel like we're giving up. I've been speaking to so many who try to change their lives, and it's like, it's no use, it's just, I'm feeling pain all the time. And when we hear stories like this, it totally resonates. It resonates as deep truth within me. And hearing these stories is just, that's what I believe, deep inside of me. But in those painful moments, it's very hard to believe that when we're not experiencing things like you have.
Yes, on that note of like not knowing what's tripping you up, that was one of the big, uptakes for me was it was so dramatic. I had no idea how much fear, for instance, I was carrying around with me, how much habituated fear. I had no idea. When it all came off, it kind of gave me the space, and much of it stayed off for 2 or 3 months afterwards. It kind of came back on, but in the moment and then in the afterglow, it was amazing. I would muse like I had no idea how afraid I was. I was just 13. I had a reasonably good, easy North American life, and yet, there were all these layers and accretions of garbage that I had picked up and put on as a costume, and it was so clear that that was my problem. That pleasure and pain are part of having a human nervous system, but all this extra stuff was extracurricular suffering. This was a whole not just fear, but there was it's that voice in the head, the judge in one's head, the demons of one's family, one's culture, all that conditioning is just this great, or this really horrible YouTube commentary, DVD commentary on your whole life, and then when it was gone, it was like, good Lord, this is so free, this is so freeing. Yeah.
On that note, I just wanna. I thought about something, because I'm a person who can be very like this. Before I started the spiritual journey, I was just like that, and went really deep down. But I can still feel that I wake up one day and it's just so cloudy, and it's just everything is heavy, and I'm afraid of everything. And then next day I can be like feeling, no negative thoughts today. I feel like I can do anything, and I just feel so light, and I'm so happy. And then the next day I can be like, like normal. And I've been wondering about that, because it seems like there's so much we cannot control. I can do a part of it. That's why I'm doing this work. I think we can do a lot. And if I hadn't worked on myself and started this spiritual path, I would definitely be in this dark hole. I think. But still, I feel sometimes that, you know, the weather inside of me, I cannot always control.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I like to tell people is that don't try to change the content of your life or the content of your mind or meditations. What I think what the spiritual journey really is all about is a dramatic shift in context. Is people might be confused over my use of those words, but there's a sense that, you know, the surface of the ocean is always going to be filled with ups and downs. You know, and our minds and bodies are going to have the kind of thoughts, and some days are going to have more thoughts and feelings, other days are going to have fewer thoughts and feelings. Some days the weather, you know, is going to kick up different things. And so, like, for instance, with the meditation practice, that has always been a vehicle toward connecting with the strata that just aren't so affected by that weather. Right. You know, and there's not a sense of trying to push away the weather. The sky doesn't have to push away the clouds. Right. You know, if we kind of come into that sky part of ourselves, the clouds are there, and we might even feel them more acutely, but they don't grip us so much, and they don't send us into this really contractive state.
Right.
And
that's my experience too, that I welcome it more. Okay, I'm like that. I accept it more. It's a totally different way of being, but I'm still feeling it. It's still there, but it's like I'm still feeling kind of okay. It's like I'm observing it more. But it's not pleasurable. Like a part of me was feel like, you know, I don't want to be here, but let's accept it, you know, because it's much more fun to be inspired and happy. I love feeling happy and inspired, but it's not always like that. But okay, so let's go back, because then after that life review and that feeling of, I guess everything happened at the same time, so you don't know what happened before and then after and everything. It's kind of where everything happens now, in a sense.
It was very close to that. Yes, yeah, pretty much. Right. Yeah.
But then, just continue.
Highly compressed experience. Right. But then the next thing I remembered after that was, you know, the impact, and then sort of coming to later on. And, you know, our car was in a very different place than where it started at the beginning. And so the emergency responders were, you know, kind of cutting the car open to get us out of there. I remember being placed on the gurney. They were very careful about my neck and my spine because they, you know, had no idea what kind of injury I might have. We're both taken into the ambulance. We're driving away. Here's where some of that, you know, that out of body stuff was happening as well. But it was the whole body sort of thing. So I had this. You know, I was clearly concussed, and I knew it because they would ask me what my name was, and I said, I have no idea what my name was, but, you know, that's my mother over there. And so I'm in the gurney, in the ambulance, and my mother calls my name out a couple times, and, you know, I tell her that I'm okay twice. On the second time, she registered, and then I felt her leave her body. And through this time, it was also my awareness wasn't just, you know, in my strictly localized within my physical body, but it was kind of throughout the whole ambulance, and there was a sense of being diffuse and everywhere. And so, you know, when she talked, it felt as if she was speaking from me and within me, you know, at a certain sense. And so when she registered, there was this real sense of release. You know, just such a profound sense of release came over me, and then consequently, I felt her breathing change from a real labored sort of breath to a very smooth, you know, breath, and so that was, you know, beyond all the spiritual stuff and all that sort of strata of experience. Just there was something that was deeply, profoundly touching in having. Knowing that my mother was, you know, my mother's spirit, you know, that she was keeping that body going until she knew that her work was basically done, that she could go. And I didn't put that together in the ambulance. I kind of felt her calm down and settle. And, you know, we eventually get to the hospital. And, you know, then my father comes in from behind, you know, a few layers of, you know, green hospital curtains to where my sister and I are. And, you know, I'm still lying on this gurney because they're not sure if I, you know, am okay yet. They have to check me out still. And then I find that, you know, he says, your mother's gone. And that was, you know, that was the blow the biggest blow of my life. It's like getting a bowling ball dropped on one's stomach. And so, there the grief begins just like, say, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross would lay it out in a book, like clockwork, all the stages of grief over the next few months and years.
Yeah, because was that what started your whole deep research? Because at the point in your life you became really ascetic. I think you were only 17, and you were really diving into spiritual paths and meditating intensely and waking up in the morning very early and being really intense about the journey.
Yes, that was the galvanizing element. I mean, the next months that followed, I on the outside I might have looked like a crazy grieving teen, which in part I was, and sometimes erratic even because of the anger that would come through. But at the same time, the emotions for the first few months, it was like having a gushing waterfall of emotion just filling my life, but at the same time there was a sense of a vast cave behind the waterfall, a vast stillness, like that just seemed to go on forever. And I would play with it. I was like, "What's that?" I could so as if fall into that silence, and when I would do that, bliss and joy would come out of my body, and that was for me the oddest thing, because I would think wow, I'm fairly broken here, and yet here's all this bliss and joy, at the same time. What's going on? I mean, I started to wonder if anybody else in my family was feeling this, and I one day I went to ask, I was going to ask my dad, and then immediately I had the sense of we're not sharing this experience, because I immediately knew the answer, and I was like, oh, never mind, never mind, and there was this real sense to kind of keep the space or keep this sort of strata of experience a little bit under wraps, and kind of so I could explore it freely without having, the adults kind of come in and make me feel as if I couldn't have it. And so I just kind of explored this, and then it faded when I went back to school, and I tried to pick up where I left off. And I did that, I'd say, for 4 years, to varying degrees. I tried to somehow retrieve like the life track up until that experience and try to continue to live it, but it just wasn't working. As much as I tried, I didn't really have my heart in it. And instead, over those years, and that the spiritual search, which kind of, I didn't even know it was a spiritual search until I walked into a metaphysical bookstore, a year and a half after the event with my sister. I was just going along on an errand with her. I didn't like metaphysical bookstores, or I didn't have any attraction. I'd never been in one. And so
it was more like a natural part of you, and it didn't label it in a way?
I had no words.
Right.
I had no words. I have very few words.
And are you saying that you felt like this disconnection all of a sudden, that these experiences that you had, this connection you had, it kind of, you couldn't really integrate it anymore or feel it as a reality as much, so you started looking for it in a way?
Yes, yeah, oh yes, it faded, it definitely faded as I tried to be the normal person, whatever I thought that was. I tried to be maybe the person that I previously had wanted to be, and I tried to pick it up. And there were some interesting experiences at that point. Anytime that I would get silent, when I played drum set a lot, so anytime, and that really kind of put me into a very silent space, or taking a shower. Anytime I would engage in any activity, even studying, doing my homework at night in the kitchen, I would start to feel this vast presence, looming just outside the room. And I was like, oh my God, because I'd seen ghosts as a child and all that sort of stuff. But this, I'd never felt anything quite like this before. I was like, it's got to be 100 ghosts out there. That's what I was thinking. Oh my God. I was so terrified. I was so frightened that I decided we cannot let our mind go silent. We just have to keep it busy.
Oh.
It was funny. And I realized years later, I realized that was just the presence. I was pushing it away. I was pushing my own sense of a vaster consciousness kind of away, trying to be this this young Thomas Ward Howell character, trying to be this guy with a personality who'd grown up in a certain way and wanted certain things.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't know it at the time, and so a local friend who is a psychic kind of somehow did something to help me kind of tone things down, and then I had a more gradual kind of progression back. But I walked into a metaphysical bookstore, and not all of that sense had gone away. It was still there, but I opened up a book in the back, and it was about Himalayan yogis and their experiences, and it was talking about this thing called samadhi. It was talking about being able to live life from that place and kind of what it's like. And as I was reading this page, I was just absolutely blown away by the similarity.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, and so I was just in that bookstore, reading this, that, and the other thing for 2 years, just coming in whenever I could, and the owner was really nice as long as I didn't damage any of the books. He knew I wasn't made out of money. It must have been
amazing, like finally understand more of what you've been going through, like coming home in a sense.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, at those days I was very excited because I'd get all the full body chills, and I'd get this, this kind of electricity that would shoot up through my body whenever I would sort of encounter something that seemed to resonate with, what had happened. I was still, though, I was cut off. So I mean, there was a surge. I had the sense that I need to begin a meditation practice. I at one point was offered transcendental meditation, and although it deeply resonated with me, there was also a block that said, "No, you're not ready yet." So I didn't. That was at age 14, so I didn't pick that up. And I was graced with all these sort of mystical mentors and friends that were in my hometown at that time, and they had that presence about them. They had that something that I remembered, and so I would be with them and kind of explore that resonance. And after a while, I started to meditate, probably in a very poor way, but as I think the saying goes, the right person with the wrong means will succeed. If they just keep going, there was some grace there. And so I would, go out to the nature preserve and try to do a Buddhist meditation I copied from the film The Little Buddha, or I'd read I think the Lama Surya Das book was, I think I kind of perennially had that checked out from our local library, Awakening the Buddha Within, and I would try to pick up what I could from that book or other Buddhist texts. And
then you found your thing in a way. That was what was it called? A tradition that you found?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean I had so at a certain point I was 17, and at that point I decided to kind of give into the crazy monk that I felt within me, give into those aspirations, full time, big time, and I started doing that. 6 hours of meditation. A lot of them were discipline meditations, so I'd be like counting from 1 to 10 over and over again with the mind to control my thoughts and push them out. And while I did develop, I would find myself in the silence. By the end of it, it would take some time, and I was very tight in a certain sense, and so my heart knew there was more. My heart. Especially, I opened up Autobiography of a Yogi. Then that book just kind of opened my heart to greater vistas. Yogananda had written in there that if you pray to Babaji, he'll hear it. And I said, like, oh, well, let's see if this, So I just started praying to Babaji at the end when I get the deepest part of my meditations to, help me find my path. I was sending out to monasteries for brochures. It didn't matter what they were, the Kriya Yoga people, Carmelite Christians, Zen monks, 2 or 3 monasteries around Crestone, Colorado, and none of the traditions felt quite right. So as I was praying, and a series of synchronicities sort of directed me to this practice called the Ishayas Ascension.
Right,
and
that was what it was.
That was the one, yes, yeah. So that that kind of came into my life. I tried to come into my life several times, actually. I discovered its website in 1998, even very early on. I was only 15. And as the second it mentioned something about stress release, I was like, I don't care about stress release, boring. I just kind of clicked away. And then later, a friend at school had introduced me. He kept saying, "There's somebody who works here at the grocery store that you need to meet because you talk about the same thing." So I met him. At the time, his name was Josiah, and he was telling me about these people called Ishayas and this thing called Ascension. And I was 16. Truthfully, I had no idea what he was talking about, and I kind of pretended that I did. I did one of those things. But he was very, very kind and very sweet and very open and expansive in many ways. And so about a year later, my sister and I formed this local metaphysical society, and we were going around. We were thinking, who do we invite? Immediately he comes to mind, top of the list. Oh, get this guy in here and invite him. And he came and we meditated together. And I didn't know his practice, but I could tell whatever he was doing was effective. I could sense that there was an emanation of silence that was coming out of him. And here I'd now found a kindred spirit. And while I wasn't necessarily going to pick up his practice because I wanted to be dedicated to what I was doing, a few months later he invited me to a course, and I found myself going. So.
So tell us a little bit about this tradition or this kind of path that you really feel at home with. What is different with this kind of way of meditating than compared to others?
Well, it's one of, and it's, certainly there are many, I think, really good effective practices for different people with different dispositions, and it's part of a subset of what I'll call effortless meditation. So first of all, I did a lot of effortful meditating before this. I was really pushing myself in that ascetic sort of way,
right?
And that it was, in that sense, there was a real night and day about it. That, and even the underlying philosophy was quite different, and that kind of made a difference in my approach. Before I had the sense that enlightenment must be some very difficult sort of state, and indeed it does take commitment, and it isn't without challenge, but it's not inherently difficult. It is kind of our natural state. I thought it might be unnatural. I thought that our natural state might be more the confusion and suffering that seemed to be the norm. That was my wiring, and so I then from that I thought, you must have to really work hard to climb out of this hole. But truthfully, with this practice, it's like no, you're working hard right now. Suffering is hard work. Remaining contracted is hard work. You just can't. You're not close to the switches to turn them on and off yet, because we try to, even if we know about our psyche and our knots, when we try to change them in a superficial sort of way, it's like trying to fix the plumbing in the basement from the penthouse. It's like we have to have a way of relaxing sort of below the level of the patterning. We have to go back into the root of our nervous system, which is samadhi. That silence is really the basic root level of everything.
So samadhi means silence?
So samadhi is, we could call it that. It's the now, it's the silence. Technically, one of the definitions is flawless evenness. We could call it the samadhi, the now, the here, the Tao. They're all those words are synonymous really for the same universal human experience, and universal place within all of us that we experience all the time throughout life anyhow, with or without a meditation practice. It just comes sporadically.
I think I know what you mean, because sometimes I feel, even though I'm just, it's really bad weather inside of me, I still have way back there this silence or this peaceful place. But I just have to be aware of it. I have to pay attention to it in a sense.
And that can be one facet of it, and sometimes, no matter where we are in our lives, it can be even it can be more immediate, like the big, dominant experience. Like we've all had Maslow's peak experiences, like when the past and the future fall away, when we're just fully present what we're doing. It's like the runner's high, like an artist who suddenly just transcended, time and space, and you find yourself absolutely absorbed. And there's, in that absorption, at the heart of that experience, if we were to just turn back a little bit, is that silence, is that samadhi. And we want to go there as human beings with our nervous systems. Our mind wants to go there, because our mind in that space is absolutely at full capacity. Our nervous systems are absolutely kind of full on. And so like with the ascension practice and with other mantric practices, and we'll later be sharing. I'll be sharing an old mantric practice, but done in an effortless sort of way. We just sometimes need a little bit of a say like a guide to get back into that space. We have to take the right approach.
I like mantras. I have found that those works for me.
Yes.
Actually, it stills my mind more than anything. And I think we're different, that different things works for different people. But mantras has given me that is what actually has given me some spiritual experiences. I haven't been able to achieve that with other things. There was one time where I meditated on my heart, where I don't know how to explain it, if I was out of my body or like you say, full body. I actually love that term, because I was like, maybe that was what I had. I don't know, but it felt like I was just as big as the universe.
Yes.
Yeah. And
the universe is your body. It's all your body at some level. Yeah.
And I loved myself, and I was love. So I had this feeling or sensation that I was loved and I loved myself. So it was this kind of, I was both things, like in a sense duality, but it was the same. And I just wish, that I had that experience every day, because now it's more of a memory. I can't really tap into it, but I was like, when I woke up, I was like, what just happened? It was amazing.
But that's beautiful. You've had a powerful taste then. So
I've had, and so I know that when I don't love myself as much, I know that I am love, and that's why one of my greatest visions is to help others to love themselves, because I know that they are love. Because that was also part of what came through, was that I love myself, and I am love. But that is the fact for everybody else. That was this insight that I got. And I remember I interviewed the Princess of Norway, and she's a spiritual teacher, and she said, I thought at some point in my life that I was evil. And I think maybe more people have thought that maybe, deep inside I'm evil, because we have this ego, and we're trying to survive, and sometimes we have negative thoughts, and we're like, I just want to... Yeah. So we can have this sense that we're evil, and my sense, was the opposite, or what I experienced was that we are love. That's what we are in our core. So it's really profound, and I think it was a meaning, a purpose to me experiencing that, just knowing that. And do you feel that as well, that in the sense that there's a destiny here? Because there were so many things you wanted to do in life, it seems like, and you had so many talents, but do you feel like this was your destiny?
Absolutely. As soon as I, I kind of gave it some time afterwards to see if it was, like I was, just overexcited. But just about as soon as I went into that class, that ascension class, for instance, and started that practice, not only did I know I was on the right track generally spiritually, but I'd come home. I'd come home to my specific vehicle of returning back to the source. And I kind of had a sense that, all those that I was, part of my life was, should I ever reach a place of being useful and helpful, was that I could be able to kind of teach people how to fish, give people tools that empowers them to relax back into their self, with or without a teacher around within 100 miles, or they could just do it on their couch or in their chair or out in the woods or any place, or at work, or on the subway. So that there was no place where one couldn't tap into that space. That was very clear that there's been a script running, and the script was taking me in a certain direction, and thankfully the cues were obvious enough for somebody like me to kind of pick up on and go with the flow instead of resisting them.
Yeah. Wow, we have to wrap up this interview, but there are so many more questions, but time is running. But tell us just shortly, where can people find you, and how do you help people if there's somebody out there now who really wants to connect with you in some way?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think my links will probably be posted, but you can contact me very reliably through either of my websites for meditation and you know, this whole world of expansion that we've been talking about. It's www.ascension-meditation.com, ascensionmeditation.com. And then I also, you know, also work as an intuitive astrologer, kind of a psychic astrologer. More that's helping people connect with their life purpose. That's I think the thrust of that sort of work, and you know, kind of sing their soul song back to them through intuition and astrology, and getting people lined up with the direction they need to go in, and that's awakenedlightastrology.com. So those are my two current works.
Beautiful. I will put them right below the video. And for those who are in the membership or are curious about it, we will do the meditation there as a bonus from Ishtar. All right. Thank you so much. This was really profound. I just have to say, I'm really grateful. This resonated totally in my body, and you're doing amazing work. Thank you so much for sharing and for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah.
And thank you so much for watching, guys. And remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't before. Much light. Bye.